Welcome to Boardroom Forum Live. My name is Chantal van der Walt, and I'm a director in the strategy and team focused on sustainability and climate change response. Today we're starting a series on sustainability transformation in the public sector, and we're joined by Nino Manus, a partner in our team that's focused on sustainable water infrastructure. Nino also looks at public and private sector clients, supporting them with turnaround strategies for sustainability, institutional modernization, and revenue enablement. So very excited to speak today. And we are focusing on one particular topic that Nino's got some quite great insight on, which is around public-private collaboration, and in particular how a water infrastructure project was used as a catalyst for implementing such a collaboration. Welcome, Nino.
Thanks, Chantal.
Great. So, Nino, I think the first question is, what is the difference between a public-private collaboration and a public-private participation project?
Thanks, Chantal. So let me start off with a public-private participation project. As we know that a PPP, as most of us know it, is a legislated process that is followed by National Treasury in terms of getting a private provider that is basically appointed to build, operate and transfer projects and taking a lot of the risk on behalf of government in terms of operating that specific project or infrastructure. So the risk is mainly with the private sector partner, whilst when we look at public-private collaboration, it is basically a model where government and private sector is coming together to collaborate on a 50-50 basis around a specific infrastructure project. That could be water, it could be transport, it could be energy, but the main principle is that it's based on looking at shared control, looking at specific governance roles that are put in place, as well as ensuring that there are transparency throughout the project. So that is the main difference between the public-private collaboration project as well as the PPP as we know it within the water and within the infrastructure sector.
Okay, that makes sense, because a lot of the struggles that we have is that we're dealing with wicked challenges and not really easy to solve with one role player at the table. So from your experience, why now? Why are we seeing that the private sector is keen and interested to get involved? What are they getting out of these types of projects?
Thanks, Chantal. I think that's a great question. I think first of all, we're at a time in our government where private sector cannot just sit back and do nothing. As we have seen that the fiscus is constrained, so there isn't enough funding available to implement all infrastructure projects that has to be implemented. Private sector in a lot of municipal areas are struggling because service delivery is not happening. So the water that they need to actually treat their processes, the roads are full of potholes, so they cannot access, their trucks cannot access their factories. So lots of issues around service delivery that impacts on private sector. Mm-hmm. From a sustainability point of view, if you look at, for example, the mining sector, they are operating in areas where communities don't have access to water and sanitation. And what we find was that a lot of the times you'll see these huge pipelines going past communities to mining companies, whilst communities don't have access to that water, and that creates a lot of anger within these communities. And because government doesn't have a time frame at this stage in terms of when they're going to provide access to water and sanitation, communities get frustrated and they take it out on private sector companies, and in this case, for example, mining companies. So what has happened is that private sector acknowledges the fact that if they want to continue existing within a specific area, they are going to have to come to the party and collaborate with government in terms of actually enabling access to services and to proper infrastructure. And the private-public collaboration is one way of doing that. What private sector find is that it's very difficult sometimes to work with municipalities directly. Sometimes there are issues around governance, around where are the funds going, around how long it takes to deliver these projects. And all of those things have actually just added up to why private sector has to get involved at this stage.
Okay, brilliant. And from your experience, having had now implemented this over a couple of years in I think more than one place, what are some of the examples and description that you would would offer in terms of what it looks like? What are some of the success factors?
So I would like to touch on one project that we did in a province where we had the mining sector, as I've mentioned earlier, playing quite a big role in terms of just looking at how they can collaborate with government around a large infrastructure project. So as indicated in that specific province, we had the municipalities that were failing to deliver services. The mines were getting water from a huge bulk pipeline. Communities had no access to water, and they started vandalizing the infrastructure of the mine. So the mines basically there was issues around their water security and around their social license to operate. And based on that, we then with PwC, the mining sector and government looked at, but how can we actually address the situation? So through that strategizing, we basically formulated the PPC model where we said, but we need about 25 billion rand for this project where we're looking at providing bulk raw water to the mines and communities, but also as part of their social economic development, the mines said, but let's look at providing bulk potable water to these communities as well. And we basically assisted them in terms of setting up that project. The model was looking at 50% government in terms of their provision of the funding, as well as 50% from the mine. So they contributed about 12 billion rand to the project. And again, we had to set up clear governance structures. We had to ensure that all the agreements were in place, and we had to ensure that there's transparency. One of the big things that we had to address was trust. Because what we found was that, and that's probably why the project took quite a few years to get off the ground, because that trust between the private sector, government, communities was not there. And a huge momentum and effort went into building or doing stakeholder management to ensure that all parties are aligned, the process is transparent, and that everybody knows in terms of what the contributions are and how the project was going to be rolled out. So for that specific, the minister signed off on this project, and it's one of the key projects that he's actually promoting in terms of looking at public-private partnerships or collaboration for water projects. And again, as indicated, we have replicated this project in other areas as well, and even looking at it from an energy perspective as well.
No, exactly. I think there's some great application and
Absolutely.
some of our other key challenges. So some of the things that you might do, or we might do as PwC in terms of supporting a PPC?
So this was almost the brainchild of PwC, if I can put it like that. And I think what's important is that we often, in terms of our values, we say that we're going to solve important problems. And this was one of those areas where I think that we really solved or came up with a solution for the country. So first of all, we need to understand, if we have to do a project of this nature, what is the infrastructure requirement? So what is that project that needs to happen? Secondly, we need to identify who are the role players in that area, both from a public sector perspective as well as the private sector. So you might have one company that's in that area, but it might not be enough to actually form that collaboration forum. So because the more you have and more companies that are contributing, you spread the load in terms of the cost as well. Very importantly, setting up the governance structures where you have government and private sector playing an equal role in terms of just the shared control and also decisions that are being made in terms of that. Funding model, but that's one of the key things that we help them with, to look at what would be the cost to both parties, how will it be funded, will it be debt structured. So all of those aspects in terms of just the financing, PwC assisted with that. Stakeholder management was a key area that we supported as well. And then also just looking at the project oversight in terms of contractors that are being implemented. Are the proper controls in place? Are projects being implemented as they should be? And we provided that oversight to the client to just ensure that transparency and just that extra governance are in place.
All right, lovely. Thanks so much, Nina. I think reflecting on what you're saying and some of the challenges that we face just in terms of future predictions on climate change, the effects of social issues and a huge vulnerability that most of the population is dealing with on a day-to-day. This really feels for me like a solution that could replicate many times over. So where to in this series? Because I mentioned we're dealing with sustainability, transformation of the public sector. PPC sounds like a great instrument for enabling that, but where to next?
So thanks for that. I think that, just talking about public sector and what we can achieve, there's quite a few things that we would like to touch on as the public sector team. The next series will deal with sustainable financing. So as we know that, if you look at green infrastructure, if you look at sustainability, if you look at the ability of municipalities to put together bankable projects, what will that look like? What are funders looking for? And we have a team that's going to talk through that. The next series we're going to look at is in terms of cities. So we're all talking about sustainable cities and, what does green infrastructure look like? And we would like to make that practical for our audience and for the listeners. So just giving some perspectives in terms of what that looks like. Mm-hmm. There's also going to be a series on sustainable water management. And also, what are the building blocks towards sustainable water management? We all know that, the president announced that energy is currently a crisis, but water would be the next crisis. And I think we're seeing it already. And I think from PwC's point of view, we've got a lot of expertise and experts that will talk to that, myself being one of them. And we will just highlight some of the key issues that we need to look at in terms of that. And then finally, quite a hot topic that everybody is talking about is energy. Mm-hmm. And how do we keep the lights on? And I think this is going to be such an exciting session because we've got a team of experts that will talk about what are some of the things that they're looking at in terms of looking at renewable energy, sustainable energy, and just what are those options out there for our customers and for consumers as well. So that will be the series and some of the topics that we will be covering. So yeah, looking forward to the next few sessions that are coming up.
Thank you so much, Nina, for your insights today. And that ends Boardroom Forum Live for today. Thanks for joining us.